This is the car that could finally beat the Tesla Model 3 and become the best electric car you can buy.
It's the new BMW i4, but what is it? Is it any good? And is it actually better than a Tesla Model 3? We're going to find out all that and much more in this review. But first, if you want to see lots of other new car reviews, then subscribe to our channel. And if you're after a new car, to make sure you're paying the right price and to get a great deal, click on the link, look in our description below, or just Google What Car Deals.
So the i4 is essentially a fully electric version of the BMW 4 Series Gran Coupe, which is a pretty good starting point because that is a fantastic car, just like the rest of the 4 Series lineup, which of course is very closely related to the BMW 3 Series. Those fuel-powered cars are so good because they have fantastic interiors, great engines, they're comfortable and amazing to drive.
And on the face of it, the i4 basically looks like a 4 Series, doesn't it? And it's interesting seeing BMW's design tactics for its EVs change over the years, because the BMW i3 was released around 10 years ago, and that was a really wacky looking futuristic electric car. But BMW's modern EVs, the iX3 and the i4, look very, very similar to the fuel-powered cars on which they're based. They've kind of gone for a more conventional, toned-down look for their EVs. So that means with the i4, the only real differences to point out in terms of styling compared to a 4 Series is this plastic covering for the grille. There's a few more aerodynamic alloys you can choose from in the lineup, and there's a few blue highlights dotted around the car as well. But apart from that, it basically is a 4 Series, isn't it? There are two main versions of the i4 that you can buy. You can get this eDrive 40, or you can get a more powerful M50. The two cars basically look fairly similar, but if you do go for an M50, you get a few more sporty touches here and there. So the i4 basically looks like a 4 Series Gran Coupe on the outside, and it's very similar on the inside as well. You get a near enough identical driving position, and you're much lower to the ground than you are in a Polestar 2 or a Model 3. And it's really comfortable up front as well. So these seats are really good. You get loads of side support, much more than you get in a Model 3. And it's quite practical too. So under this armrest, you've got a big cubby hole. You've got another storage space at the top of the center console with 2 cup holders. That's where your wireless phone charging is as well. Glove box is a decent size. And you get partitioned door bins as well. So splitting it up in those 2 sections means that if you put something in there, it just stops it from rattling around if you're driving along. Now, some people might prefer the more minimalist look that you get in a Model 3, but in terms of actual build quality and looking at the quality of materials that are used, it's the i4 that's a bit better than the Model 3. So it feels really plush throughout, very well put together. The only slight weak point is some of these plastics down here on the center console that don't feel particularly amazing quality, but really that's the only thing that stops it from being as good, as impressive as much more expensive electric cars like the Audi e-tron GT and the Porsche Taycan. This is a really, really good electric car interior. Something that is different from the 4 Series is the tech here though. So now with the i4, you've got this 12.3-inch digital driver display joined to this massive 14.9-inch touchscreen. Now this is BMW's latest iDrive system. It's the same setup that you find in the iX, and iDrive has always been one of the best infotainment systems around. This latest system is still very good by new infotainment standards, but it's not perfect. So you've got a lot of menus and sub-menus. A lot of these icons are just too small. It would be much easier to use them if they were bigger. And it just generally feels a little more complicated to use than the previous iDrive. It's great though that you still have this rotary dial down here, because it means it's very easy to control lots of the functions while you're driving in a safe way rather than having everything buried on the touchscreen. But what a shame that BMW is now putting the climate controls on the touchscreen itself. So if you want to change the temperature, and if you want to do anything more complicated than change the temperature, then you have to dive into a climate menu, and it's just annoying having that layer of complication that just seems a bit unnecessary when dials and buttons are a much simpler and safer solution to it all. I suppose it is good though that this screen is very, very responsive, so there's no delay when you swipe or push a button, and the graphics are really crisp and really clear as well. And another thing you've got to try and help improve the usability of all the tech in here is a voice command system. Now, most voice command systems really aren't very good. They're very inconsistent in how they respond. and don't always do what you're asking them to do. But this BMW system is actually pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. Things are less impressive in the rear seats because you've got that dramatic curving roofline on the outside, which means inside headroom really isn't great. So it's actually quite a lot less headroom than you get in something like a 3 Series, and compared to the 4 Series, the floor and the rear bench is actually higher in the i4 because you've got batteries underneath here. So if you're 6 foot, you've got quite a lot of leg room, but headroom isn't great and your head will be stuck against the roof if you are tall and sat in the back. And another annoying thing is that you've still got a big lump in the floor down here. Now, if you know that you're only going to have kids in the back, or you're only very occasionally going to need adults sat in the back, that probably doesn't matter. But compared to other large electric cars, there are quite a few that are better for rear seat space, particularly the Model 3.
The i4's got a pretty decent boot, and like the Polestar 2, it has a hatchback opening, so you can see it's got this big, wide, tall opening. That means if you're putting bulky stuff into the boot, you'll find it easier to do so in this than a Model 3, which has a big boot, but it's a saloon, so the opening is a bit more limited in that respect. Most i4s also offer a decent amount of underfloor storage for the charging cables, but you can see that this one's got the upgraded sound system. So because of this extra subwoofer in the back, you can see that eats into a lot of available space in the back there, so much so that it actually is quite a struggle to fit anything in the extra space that's provided there, which is a bit annoying. But in terms of carry-on size suitcases, you can fit 8 of these in the back of the i4. Compared to a Model 3, that's pretty decent. That can fit 9, but the Model 3 can also fit an extra 1 up front. The i4 doesn't have a front boot at all. This plastic covering here is just over the electric motor that's underneath it. There's no extra storage.
So we're in the eDrive 40, and this is the entry-level version of the car, which gets a single electric motor driving the rear wheels with 335 brake horsepower, and it will do 0 to 62 miles per hour in 5.7 seconds, which is pretty quick. It's not quite as quick as a Model 3 long range, admittedly, but how quick do you want to go? Especially because the acceleration is really forceful and enough to pin you back in your seat. So for most people, this will be plenty quick enough. Now, similarly with the range, the 83.9 kilowatt hour battery gives this car a claimed range around 367 miles, which is a few miles off what you'll get in a Model 3 long range. But considering that's the claimed range, the real world range should be comfortably 250 miles, which for many people, if you can charge at home, that will cover a lot of the journeys that you need to do. And you should really enjoy the miles that you do in this car because it's a really nice thing to be in. It's comfortable, so it doesn't have that really firm, harsh edge that a lot of electric cars have. It feels really well controlled, very smooth. It's good at absorbing the worst of the bumps on the road. The steering's really nice. It's very direct, very well weighted. It's really easy to stop smoothly as well, and that's something that a lot of electric cars don't get right. But in the i4, the brake pedal is very consistently weighted. You can also increase the effect of regenerative braking by putting it in B mode, which effectively gives you a one pedal driving function. So when you lift off the accelerator, the car will slow down to a complete stop. So around town, you hardly have to touch the brake pedal at all.
If the eDrive 40 doesn't do it for you, the Rapid M50 is currently your only alternative in the i4 lineup. It rockets from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 3.8 seconds, almost 2 seconds quicker than the eDrive 40, but not quite as quick as the 3.4 second Model 3 performance. But still, it is rapid and actually quicker than an M3 competition.
But the M50 costs around £10,000 more than the eDrive 40. And it's not a proper M car like an M3. It doesn't even handle as well as a Model 3 Performance, which feels much tidier, especially through the bends, because the M50 is a very, very heavy car. It's not as fast as a Model 3 Performance either. It's still good, but the eDrive 40 is definitely the i4 at its best.
It's not cheap though. The eDrive 40 costs a bit more than an equivalent Polestar 2, and if you go for an M50, then that's more expensive than a Model 3 Performance. So it's a brilliant car, but it's not a bargain.
Still, the i4 is very nice inside. It's quick, great to drive, comfortable, quiet. Do we now have an EV that's more recommendable than a Model 3?
Well, here's the thing. The i4 is better than the Model 3 in a few areas, but if you buy the Model 3 or indeed any other Tesla, then you get access to Tesla's supercharger network. So that means that if you need to charge when you're on the move, there will be lots of superchargers for you, they will be very well maintained, and you'll get very fast charging speeds from them. If you buy any other electric car, like this i4, then you're at the mercy of the rest of the UK's charging infrastructure, which will typically mean slower charging times. It will be more of a gamble on whether the machine will actually work or not, and sometimes now you'll find that there are queues to join those charging points. So the fact is that right now, on average, a long journey in a Model 3 will be far easier, far less stressful than a long journey in an i4, and that, for electric car buyers, is a big consideration.
Of course, there are other things to factor in as well, and the charging infrastructure will change eventually. There's a big push to improve things over the next few years, and if Tesla opens up its superchargers to non-Tesla drivers, then that really will be a game changer. But for now, with the cars so closely matched in most departments, this is one area where the Model 3 is streets ahead.
So how long will it actually take to charge up your i4? Well, the maximum charging speed of this car is 200 kilowatts, which is faster than the maximum charging speed in a Polestar 2, but it's a bit slower than what a Model 3 can manage. At this fastest speed, you can get a 10 to 80% charge in just over 30 minutes, but that is if you can find a charger that's fast enough. If you go for the eDrive 40 version of this car, there are two trim levels to choose from, this entry-level Sport or this M Sport model. The difference in price between them isn't huge, so if you want the slightly sportier styling of M Sport, then that's up to you. But as we've already said, the M50 model is a lot more expensive, although you do get more kit as standard, like adaptive suspension and also upgraded brakes, but we'd stick with the eDrive 40. So the i4, particularly in eDrive 40 form, is fundamentally a brilliant electric car. It's great inside, it's good to drive, it's comfortable, it's got a very good range. Is it better than a Model 3? Now, some people might be sick of these comparisons because you might not even be considering a Tesla, but the fact is, the Model 3 has been the best electric car on sale for quite a while now. So it's important to benchmark new rivals against it to see if it's still the best. Ultimately, as we've said, it's very close between the two cars. The i4 is a bit better in some areas, but because the Model 3 has such a big advantage with its supercharger network, ultimately, it still has the edge. For more information on the i4, go to whatcar.com, where you can read our extended written review of this car and every other car around. On our website, you can also get a great saving on the next car that you want to buy. But before you go anywhere, subscribe to our channel so you can see our new car reviews as soon as they go live, and tell us in the comments below, would you have an i4 or a Model 3?